Welcome back to another episode of The Conscious Artist, a safe space for conversations around mental health awareness for musicians, artists, and all human beings. I am your host, Pallavi Mahidara. I'm a concert pianist and teacher, and I am absolutely thrilled that you are joining us today. My hope for this show is that it will give all of us a sense of solidarity and knowledge that we are not alone, and together, through these conversations, we can create more awareness and change for a healthier future. I am super excited for our guest today. I don't even know where to begin with his list of accomplishments. He was recently appointed CEO of the Levine School of Music in Washington, D.C., and is a graduate of Howard University and George Washington Law School. While in law school, Jeffrey founded The Musicianship, a nonprofit organization that facilitates music lessons, experiences, and opportunities to benefit those who need it the most. He was named BE Modern Man by Black Enterprise magazine and one of Magic Johnson's 32 under 32. I was thrilled to meet him in person a few months ago and am delighted that someone so focused and driven on music education has joined the Levine School of Music. This is a school that is very dear to my heart and one that I've had an ongoing relationship with for over 20 years. I could go on and on about my guest's achievements, but I'm going to let him tell you all more himself. Please join me in welcoming Jeff Tribble to the show. Jeff, I'm so happy that you could be here today with us.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course, absolutely. The topics of music education and music in the community are very near and dear to my heart. I grew up doing a lot of educational concerts, and I began my first teaching experiences at the age of 15. And I really feel that is one of my biggest responsibilities as a musician, to pass on and share the wisdom and the knowledge that I've been so lucky to receive through the years from my incredible teachers and mentors. So, as someone who is extremely involved in music education and music in the community, I'd love to start our conversation today with a very direct question for you. I want to ask you, why do you think learning music is so important for kids?
Well, I think that music is so important for kids for a myriad of reasons, ranging from cognitive development to socio-emotional health to them simply getting opportunities to explore outside of areas where they are, day in and day out involved in things that are sort of run of the mill. And so it helps to open up pathways for creativity and thinking outside the box, both things that you need to pursue careers in music, but even outside of music. I could go on about all of the research that demonstrates the positive effects that it can have on children, but I imagine we might get into that a little bit later as a part of our conversation. Like yourself, I was involved in music at a very young age, and being able to recreate narratives like yours or even mine is a dream come true for me. And so I'm very pleased to be doing the work that I'm doing with Levine, and I'm very pleased to be here with you talking about the work that we are so very passionate about.
I'm so happy that you're here with us today. And I would love if you could tell us a little bit about your own musical origins and sort of how you got more and more into music education.
Sure. Well, I grew up on the south side of Chicago. Both of my parents were musicians, whose parents were musicians, and their families who were also musicians. And so I think there's maybe one person in my family who's not a musician. And so this was sort of something that I was destined to do, at least from a performance standpoint. I don't think that I have any music educators in my family, but certainly the expectation growing up was that I would take music lessons, and I did. And so I took some piano lessons. I sadly did not ascend to play as well as you do, but my bread and butter was more so percussion. And so starting at the age of 3, started playing the drums. I started playing in church at 7 as the son of 2 ministers. And from there, it led to playing in symphonic ensembles and marching band ensembles. I would say the height of my career was in college when I was the section leader of Howard's drumline for 3 of my 4 years there. while also in concert and symphonic band. But it was really while I was in law school that I wanted to marry my passion with music and my interest in social engineering, which is what most lawyers are interested in pursuing. And so I didn't see a reason to wait until I had graduated from law school to endeavor down that path. And so I founded the organization, as you mentioned, the musicianship, that's all about music education for predominantly children in communities that are underserved. And while I don't have a music education background, I just have seen how it has inculcated so much in young people that has allowed them to be not only extraordinarily talented, but just more well-rounded human beings that creates a trajectory for them to be overall successful in life. So that is sort of my musical journey, and that is some of how I came to a place of being involved in the music education space.
I love that. What a beautiful story. And you bring up something that I want to go more into detail about, which is about cognitive development, emotional development. You know, studying an instrument can be so beneficial in so many ways, not only with developing dexterity and, you know, training your fine motor skills, but also, of course, discipline, also having some sort of purpose and direction. But more than that, music is a universal language.
Hmm.
It doesn't matter what genre we're talking about, music is a universal language.
Hmm.
And I think very often it can be a sort of savior in some ways for many people and many children that perhaps use it as a way to escape, you know, maybe difficult circumstances or trauma. You
Hmm.
know, it can give them a sense of community if they have a chance to play in an orchestra or a band, or it gives them a goal. I would love to talk a little bit more about that and to know your thoughts on that.
Well, music was all of those things and more for me. When I think about the many pitfalls that await young people of color, young men of color in Chicago, I was very fortunate to find myself in a place where I could avoid a lot of those pitfalls, despite having friends who did end up in jail or who did get killed. And so I don't take it for granted that my parents were very adamant about my being involved in band, for example, which does kind of bring that communal and that family feel that so many young people crave if they don't have it in the home. They want the familial, feeling, and so they might seek it in untraditional ways, which might be a gang or running with crowds who are similarly situated, as opposed to sort of finding communities that can be positive and uplifting and can provide mentorship that alters their perspective and outlook on life. And so I was very fortunate to have music kind of act as a third parent for me in some ways to really shape my direction and provide a picture of what an avenue could look like for me. And then, yes, some of the things that you really don't think about until you're maybe on the other side of the table as an educator or as an arts administrator, when you think about what music can do to help enhance one's literacy skills or math skills, or music has been shown to raise IQ scores by 7.5 points, which is 20%. I mean, that's tremendous.
Yeah.
You, of course, don't think about that when you're young, but it is so palpable and so relevant for anyone who is, kind of just growing up, because I feel like given all that young people in a 21st century society are facing, particularly today, as we're in the, the third decade of the 21st century, with technology, they really do need to be rooted in things that are proven to help them and not proven to hurt them. I mean, technology has actually been proven to hurt people, but it is sort of just thrust upon us in a way where it's tough for us to avoid its onslaught because so much of it has become just a part of our life. Our phone is just like another limb almost, but something that can ground you like music, and not only ground you and provide a foundation for you, but allow you to grow out of that foundation. I think is just so critical, and certainly all of these positive benefits that we're talking about today kind of mirrors a lot of what I experienced growing up. I again feel really fortunate to be able to do this work for a living.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I want to backtrack to something you said earlier about music being an avenue for you, an alternative avenue for you compared to some of your peers, for example. And that brings up a very good point. For example, I did a lot of educational concerts growing up at schools, and I hope I was able to inspire some of those kids. But for many, it was probably their first exposure to classical music. And music can be a great alternative path. It can be a great guiding force. But if you don't have exposure to that because you don't have music programs in schools, and we're talking about maybe lower income communities that don't have the chance to attend concerts in the big concert halls, then what about those kids? What about the fact that they don't even have exposure to that? And that's
Hmm.
where, someone like me, for example, or, someone like you, where we've had the opportunities and we're blessed with the chance to study music and to be able to share it. I think it's so important.
Absolutely. And when you think even more granularly about this, Paula V, from a statistical standpoint, you have so much more of a chance to be successful in life pursuing music than you might even sports, for example. I mean, we tend to look at sports as a means by which young people can get these scholarships and go on to, I mean, just think about Duke, for example. It's a top tier. We may have talked about this top tier institution that, but not for being an extraordinarily talented athlete. Some young men or young women might not be able to be at Duke, but because they are extraordinary athletes, they're on to play on this amazing basketball team and go to this university and get this amazing education. You can say the same about University of Michigan or Stanford or USC, just these top tier schools that also have top tier sports programs. Well, guess what? A lot of these top tier schools also have top tier music programs. While young people of color in particular across America are, and really across the world, are pursuing, sports, probably more so soccer in outside the United States, but certainly in the United States, young people of color are pursuing football, basketball. I mean, how many people are in the NBA? It's 400, 3 to 400. How many people are in the NFL? 12 to 1300. How many people are part of the music program at Ohio State? Maybe 400 plus,
Yeah.
which is like more people than are in the NBA. And so, and many of whom got music scholarships. And so when you start to think, to your point about music being a pathway, why would we not give young people every opportunity possible to be successful? And why would we not statistically put their future in the hands of literally an instrument or tool that has been proven time and time again to affect them positively in so many ways, and that can open doors and open pathways toward high school and collegiate achievement? Sometimes it just baffles me that it's not viewed on an equal plane as sports. And this is not for me to like bash sports as I love sports, but I just think that so much more attention should and can be paid to music as it relates to its power to effectuate one's trajectory in the same or similar ways.
I agree with you completely. And to be honest, the point is not music or sports. The point is,
Right.
why are the arts constantly cut?
Right.
in schools. This is
It makes
this
no
is the main
sense.
point. This is I think one of the fundamental issues that music and the arts, and I don't know if it's because people think classical music is a dying artistic form, or there's still this sort of societal misconception that the arts and anything sort of creative is a hobby. I'm not
Hmm.
quite sure where it stems from, but music in schools, art, any sort of artistic form in schools, I think is absolutely vital.
It's a necessity.
It just constantly baffles me how many times we hear again and again and again the arts are being cut. Funding for the arts is being cut. Funding for music is being cut. Funding for the music teachers is being cut. Why?
Yeah, yeah. What's the rationale? What's the basis for that?
I mean, I love that, for example, the Levine School of Music, which is a school that I studied at more than 20 years ago, that's a school, that's part of the community. Kids are maybe not able to get a great musical education in their public schools or in their private schools, but a school like the Levine School of Music is doing amazingly to reach as many students, as many kids and adults as well
Hmm.
in the Washington D.C. metropolitan area to try and inspire people and to try and inspire the love of music. I would love if you could tell us a little bit more about the Levine School for our listeners that don't know. If you could tell us a little bit more about the Levine School and
Hmm.
the school's mission and your, I know it's very new, but your experience with the school and sort of your vision with it.
So Levine Music is a 45-year-old institution that predominantly focuses on music education, but we also have, in the last decade, focused very heavily on music performances as well. So we have an arts presenting element here, and then also a real focus on community. And so we do that through private and group instruction for children and adults. We have about 3,500 customers or families, I should say, with whom we work each week across 6 campuses and online. And we are traditionally known as an organization that is heavily focused on classical music, and we lean into that. We love that. We own that. In the last decade, we've also sort of broadened our emphasis on jazz and other types of contemporary music. We have rock offerings and all sorts of other contemporary genres that people might be interested in learning in. But you know, to your question about kind of my vision, I think that for so long, Levine and many music schools do look at music outcomes from a music aptitude vantage point. And that's how we get people who are amazingly talented, such as yourself. But there are only going to be so many people who are as talented as you. And so we then have to ask ourselves, what is our value proposition in the community? Does Levine offer things that are equally as impactful or equally as meaningful in communities beyond music aptitude? So the reason I love this podcast and what you are doing is because you are exploring the nexus between music and other areas that make people healthy, happy, whole, productive in life. And so those are the types of things that we're kind of thinking about as we reimagine what it is that we bring to the table here in the DC metropolitan area.
I love that so much, and I'm so glad to hear that. You know, as we mentioned earlier, I mean, learning an instrument by itself can teach so many valuable skills throughout life, and one doesn't need to plan to be a concert pianist in order to start learning piano. We don't need to plan an entire career around music in order to appreciate its value. And I think many times, I'm sure this has happened to you many times, I come across people that will say, "Oh, I used to play piano, but then I quit. Oh, I wish I could still play." You know,
Hmm.
people
Hmm.
realize later on in life the
Yeah.
benefits of learning an instrument, the benefits and the beauty of music and art. I don't know, somehow I feel like there's this taboo around learning music for fun.
Mhm.
You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like people, if people start to learn classical music, and I'm specifically talking about classical music, very often it feels for them as though, okay, well, they have to practice their scales and they have to, practice how many ever hours a day, and their teacher is very strict and they have to memorize this. And
Mhm.
yes, sure, if you want to become a concert pianist, sure. If you want to become a music professor, sure. And if you want
Mhm.
to learn a little bit about the instrument, or whether it's piano or violin or flute or trombone or voice or guitar, whatever it is, sure, you need to learn some basic set of skills if you want to actually have any sort of fun with the instrument at all. I think one of the most important things is to develop a love for it, because
Mhm.
that's what also translates later in life. Those are the people that are then going to come to the concerts.
That's right. Yeah, that's absolutely right. Wow. And I love how you led with discipline as it relates to honing your craft and how that then leads to the fun. Because I think that a lot of times the perception is that, oh, I'm going to jump right into the fun. It's like, well, like that's not exactly how it works. Like there's a lot of hard work that has to go into learning. And then you can begin to have some modicum of fun and enjoyment with the instrument. And I think that that is applicable to life in some ways.
Exactly. Yeah,
Most of us
exactly.
want to have fun in life, but it comes with some other, socio emotional skills like discipline and grit and confidence, and being able to kind of work on those things. I mean, you are a stalwart supporter of mental health and how being involved in music can be a catharsis, and how that can even help one's mental health. As you know, Pallavi, we have a music therapy program here at Levine Music, and
Yes, absolutely.
that is about health, mental health, but also we work with people across the spectrum. We work with people who have Alzheimer's or dementia. So music can be this real companion to help navigate the choppy waters of life, and it can be something that brings you a lot of joy. But there's work that comes with that first. And I just think that it's so applicable to life, because there has to be a certain, and I speak specifically to children about this, but you have to just dedicate yourself to the craft and to really anything that you want to be good at, because without that work, you are not giving yourself just your own fair shake at being as successful as you could otherwise be.
I completely agree. And I feel like sometimes in today's world, this idea of instant gratification takes over one's willingness to put in the
Yeah.
work. And, for example, I mean, there's a reason why I think it's what, 10,000 hours to become a master at something, right?
Yeah.
There's a reason
Yeah.
for that, because anything in life takes time. I mean, come on, even as a baby will crawl before they can walk. And when they try to stand up for the first time, they'll fall.
Hmm.
Right? It takes everything in life takes practice. There's very few
Hmm.
things, I think, that may come very naturally to anyone, and
Hmm.
not all skills to each person, and not all the same skills for everyone, right? And
Hmm.
that's the beauty of life and humanity, that we all bring something different to this world. We all
Hmm.
have different strengths, but it takes work. And I can say it now. It used to annoy the hell out of me when I was younger, but I had very strict, typical Indian parents in that way, in the sense that discipline was always on the table. There was no question of not working hard. And I am
Hmm.
so thankful and so grateful for that now, because between my parents and my upbringing and music, which I started when I was 3, I feel that discipline is something that is a guiding force in my life. But
Hmm.
somehow I feel like discipline gets a bad rap. Like it's a negative thing, but discipline is actually, I feel it's one of the most beneficial things. But what about kids that aren't as lucky as you and I growing up in families that were there to support us 24/7, mentally, physically, emotionally, financially.
Mhm.
What about kids like that? And as we said, music can be a great form of discipline and a guiding force. But again, if they're not exposed to that, what can we do to help raise more awareness and to get more musical education into those kind of communities?
Yeah, well, there's a great deal of education that needs to be done in all communities about the value of music education. And I feel like it's something that we have to just continue to work towards and fight on each day. As much as we know it and are aware of it and have known about it and have been in these communities who have been proponents of it for so long that it's almost like secondhand to us. There are people who still don't know it or honor it for whatever reason. It's really interesting to hear you talk about the discipline piece. I think we probably talked about it when we sat down with one another here in DC, but grit is actually a greater indicator of one's life success than is one's GPA. And so, based on the kind of Angela Duckworth's grit scale. And so, when you think about becoming a master of your craft, with those 10,000 hours and being disciplined enough to do that, there's a lot of grit that comes with learning the fingering and learning the scales and being able to memorize things. And you, I presumably would have memorized them because you've kind of just gone over it so many times. Like that takes grit, that takes dedication, that takes resilience, that takes failure and
Mm.
understanding that. I mean, it's really interesting, this juxtaposition of like failure and hope. Hope is to some just like this nebulous, abstract thing. But if you don't have something as small as hope, how can you even go to school thinking or believing that it will lead to some positive pathway later on in your life? If you don't hope that like there will be some positive outcome from you doing very small things, then it's going to be very hard or challenging for you to be successful in life because you will not have dedicated yourself to the small things to kind of move you on in your way. And so, music helps to build grit. It helps to build discipline. It helps to and really build hope because you can see, when I talk about short, intermediate, and long term outcomes, you can see from a short term like how, wow, like yes, I've practiced, for this week, and I came back to my lesson the next week, and I actually got better. And I could never understand how my music teacher would tell me, "You didn't practice. I can tell you didn't practice." Until I was an educator, and I was like, "I can tell you didn't practice. I can tell you didn't practice because this like I know given your ability and given the nature of this exercise how much more you would have or should have improved if you'd committed yourself to putting in the time that we discussed." And I can see, based on this skill gap or this knowledge gap, that you have not put in the work that we've discussed. You know what I mean? But why would you put in that work if you don't at least hope that you're going to get better? So I'm on a bit of a tangent now, but music has this way of taking us on this journey where we do have to be disciplined, we do have to have grit, we do have to have hope, and all of those things are very much so transferable to other areas of our lives.
But you bring up an interesting point about hope, hoping that this can doesn't have to lead, as we said, to a career, but that there will be improvement, that one has the ability to improve. What about for the kids? Because, yeah, hope should be intrinsic, it should come from within. That also depends on our surroundings
Right.
and what we are either lucky to have or unlucky to have around us, right? Basically, it gives us a sense of belonging as well. It can give us a place to feel like we belong. I suppose that's why perhaps when a child from any sort of background comes from a difficult family life or a difficult home situation or whatever it is, that something like music can give them a place where they feel like they belong. I mean, that's why probably people join gangs, or things like that. It's a sense of belonging. As you said, it's a kind
Hmm.
of family sort of
Hmm.
model.
Hmm.
I don't know. I suppose it's kind of like a little bit of a vicious cycle. It's like, well, how can you have hope if no one is investing in you?
Yep. Nope. I think that's right. There are so many challenges to overcome when you lack a traditional or healthy family structure. We may have talked about COVID making that more clear than ever. Certainly was the case here at Levine, where you go to school each day because that's where you get two meals each day. And so if during COVID, all of a sudden you can't go to school, the question isn't necessarily like how I become a better musician. It's how do I eat? And so juxtaposing the home of someone who's at home and can continue to take music lessons because they can continue to eat to someone who can't continue to take music lessons, one, because they can't afford to, because maybe mom or dad or grandmom can't afford to pay even the kind of fee with tuition assistance, but they also aren't eating. And given the digital divide, while they might have a computer to keep up with school and work because the school has gifted them some, computer, like, does their apartment have the bandwidth to withstand all the laptops or tablets that are running in the home for the children to go to school during the day and then with Zoom fatigue, stay on Zoom all in the afternoon for piano lessons virtually. It really makes you think about the life and circumstance disparities between families who have and families who don't have, and what sort of deficit the families who don't have to overcome to get to a place where music is a priority. And so when you ask the question, well, what about the children who weren't as blessed or as fortunate to simply be born into a home that has more, has access? I mean, to some degree, it's just about where were you born. I mean, it's some of it is cultural, some of it is where did I grow up. People who grow up in communities that don't have as much are there for no reason that they could have controlled. And so our responsibility as an institution, as educators, as creatives with platforms such as yours, I believe, is to, look more holistically at um, how we can be of aid, how we can be of benefit to people through music. And now that might look a little bit differently than people coming to a music studio, receiving lessons, and going home. It might mean us being a little bit more intentional about having conversations about how they feel on a particular day, or understanding where their challenges are and how we, as how we can help given what it is that we have. um, and what I say by what we have, I mean, Levine is a pretty large institution. There are things that we can do as an organization that people might not necessarily be able to do as a single person or single entity. But as a single person, single entity, you can do something. And again, that might be having a conversation. But we should be looking at maybe food insecurity or how to help allay or assuage the digital divide if that's an impediment towards people getting a healthy music education, which we purport to be so important in people's lives. But if they can't even get there, then how are we relevant? Why are we relevant? Or are we only here to serve people who, are just fortunate enough to be able to walk through our doors because they didn't have to overcome anything to sort of get to that point? So you raise a really interesting point about the people who are in communities who are kind of less privileged, less fortunate. So we have to talk more about that and figure that out.
Yeah, it's something I think about a lot because I wish I could teach for free. I wish I were in a place in my life economically where I could teach for free, but I can't. And musicians hardly get paid enough to begin with, classical musicians. So,
Right, right,
so how,
right.
it ends up becoming again a cycle. Then musicians themselves are
Hmm.
not paid enough, professors are not paid enough, and then so they can't really offer their services for free. And then you have kids who can't afford the lessons. Even what we're getting paid or we're asking for private teachers is still too much for them. You know what I mean? So,
I do, but you know what? It's not just about the money. To your point, you have to get paid to teach. I had a conversation with one of our executives here a couple of days ago about how we are, in my opinion, charged with modeling behavior that is, forward thinking, additive to people's lives. And what I mean when I say that is when people step into your classroom, you can offer them so much more than a discount on music lessons. Like you can offer mentorship. You can ask them how they're feeling when no one else has asked them that all day. Kids, unlike you and I, have the battle of social media where they are comparing themselves to these picture perfect images of their peers. So they are going through school and going through life, and nobody might stop to ask, "How are you? How are you feeling?" And they have all of these external and internal sort of pressures, and just simply having a different model or approach to education is in and of itself, I think, worth its weight in gold and has very little to do with money or what you're charging. It's more more of a mentality as educators being able to see our students as whole people, and I just think that's so critical.
no, you're absolutely right. And to be honest, I I don't think of myself as just a teacher. I do, with every single one of my students, try to be a mentor as well.
Hmm.
Every time we start a lesson, the first thing I ask was, "How was your week? How are you feeling?" And sometimes some of my kids will just spend the first hour of the lesson just sharing their anxiety, and
Hmm.
sharing the things that they're struggling with, whether it's literally at the piano or psychologically or in their personal life or with school or with exams or performance anxiety, whatever it is, balancing classes and practicing,
Hmm.
whatever it is. And so I mean, to be honest, it's part of why I decided to start this podcast, because my hope for this is simply just to be able to reach a few more people
Hmm.
than I'm in touch with, every day, and to try and create a sense of solidarity. I'm not an expert in anything other than piano, and even then, barely, you know.
Oh
But
gosh,
but
you
I,
are. Stop it, please.
but I do, I my little bit of life experience, which I know I'm very young, but my little bit of life experience, and all of the incredible wisdom and knowledge that I've gained over the years through music education, through education from my parents, through education from public schools, now from my therapist, like everything that I'm learning and gaining, like I want to share that, because maybe there's something that can help someone else out there.
And in the context of one's life journey, how much more important is it that you have taken the time to have a conversation with the student than you teaching them how to get through these couple measures that they're really struggling with? Now, I don't know. That's important too, just because as we talked about, like getting through those tough measures, that's grit, that's discipline, that's self esteem, that's confidence. Those are all of these things, which is the beauty of music education on its face, in and of itself, but they may not see that or understand that at that particular point in their life. And so to take the time to be more readily responsive to their needs at that present time is so important.
I mean, I definitely try to not only be there for them as a mentor, but also teach them how to be their own teacher. I can't be there in the practice room with them, and I can give them everything in the world in terms of knowledge and experience from myself and from my teachers. But when they're not in my classroom, when they're not in my studio, they have to be doing it themselves. And many times we're not taught how to practice, and we're not taught how to practice with our brain.
Hmm.
I talk about this in
Hmm.
other episodes, but yeah, so I mean, I'm doing my best, but as I say, like I wish I could offer more. And I completely understand and agree with your point that it's not about the money you're charging, it's about what you're giving.
Hmm.
It's about
Hmm.
what you're sharing, and I do everything that I can to share as much as I can. But we still have to take care of ourselves first so that we can show up well for others. And in this way, unfortunately, I'm not yet in a place to be able to help everyone. But that's okay, little by little, right?
Well, this is an amazing medium by which you can impart wisdom, become relatable, allow your listeners to hear their stories and other people's stories, whether it's their guests or with you personally. And I think you're doing a really amazing and fantastic thing here. The fact that you allow me to play my very small part is meaningful, and I will continue to support to the extent that I can. It's a very cool thing.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. No, I mean, come on. I couldn't not have you on the show.
You could have not had me.
No. You had to be here. But thank you so much for being here, and also just personally a personal thank you for being there for the Levine School, because as I said, it's a school that's very close to my heart, and it means so much to me also to see the school in good hands.
Well, I appreciate those kind words, and it was a pleasure talking with you today.
Thank you all so much for listening. I am truly grateful for the support from each and every one of you. If you would like to submit any questions or topics for us to address on the show, you can send us a message on our Instagram page at Conscious Artist Podcast. Help us to spread more awareness by sharing this episode with your friends, your colleagues, your teachers, and your students. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Sending you all so much love and strength to tackle this week, and we'll see you next Monday for another episode of The Conscious Artist.